Welcome to Disruption Dialogues Podcast Season 2. Listen to the influential leaders and trailblazers from around the world as they share invaluable insights to navigating the fifth industrial revolution.
Welcome everyone to Markets and Markets podcast, Disruption Dialogues. My name's Robert Outram. I'm the head of the chemicals and materials practice here at Markets and Markets. Today on the podcast with us, we have Dr. Ritu Paul from H.B.Fuller. She's the Global Technology Director. She's a polymer scientist by training. She has lots of R&D experience covering everything from electronics all the way through to consumer goods. So welcome to the podcast, Ritu.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, and today we're going to look primarily in the packaging industry and the role of adhesives and some of the challenges in that sector. So, straight off the bat, Ritu, what does the future of food packaging look like for you? What are the key market drivers that drive enhancements in the food packaging industry?
So the future of food packaging, I think we'll have to look at some of the mega trends to start with, right? What's driving some of the trends that we're seeing in food packaging, whether it be rigid packaging or flexible packaging, right? So one of the key trends, like as we know, the world is urbanizing really, really fast. And if you look at the data, depending on the source, I think 55 to 57% of the world's population today lives in an urban setting or urban area. And I think UN is saying 68% of the population will be in urban settings by 2050. So that's a huge number of people living in urban settings, which means modern lifestyles, right? Which are very typically characterized by busy schedules, need for convenience, and all of that as we are kind of trying to do our stuff and get things done. And this has fueled the demand of, I think, pre-packaged foods, right, that we are seeing, microwavable meals, ready-to-eat things in some kind of, easy-to-use packaging format, right? Again, whether it's paper packaging or flexible materials, whatever it is. And I think consumers also like, if these packages could be resealable, right? You have a cheese tray with a flap that you want to close and open and keep doing that reseal thing, right? So those are some of the trends. I think people's lack of time, modern lifestyles that are driving it. I think also there has been, the urban consumer is pretty, I would say, health conscious, as well as thinking more about, sustainability of the packaging, right? Should we be using less packaging? Should we use packages that are more recyclable, right? And things like that are some of the drivers that, that is showing up in the food packaging world. Again, whether that is, and not only food packaging, it could be other consumable things like detergents, right? You see from big bottles to maybe smaller formats, or shampoos in more like smaller flexible packaging, right? So the trends of sustainability is also translating and driving the food packaging world, I think. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we encounter on a daily basis as we are communicating with our customers our direct customers or their customers, right? So this is what we find.
Yeah, some good points there. You mentioned food trays, and we see governments, cracking down on sort of single-use packaging. We're also seeing a massive push here at Markets and Markets in, recycled, obviously the recycling of plastics and things like that. That in itself creates some big challenges around things like food safety, how to keep things food safe while being eco-friendly in the food packaging space. How is the industry going to address these challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the, like you mentioned, right? If it's food packaging, we definitely want the food to to be fresh and safe within the shelf life, right? So that creates some challenges, right? If you are all of a sudden changing the design of your package, by which I mean like the materials that are going into making the package, right? Again, whether it's flexible packaging or rigid packaging of some form, paper packaging, um, it is very important that we are able to maintain the food safety and the shelf life of the products. You don't want to have like a food item degrading because you have now oxygen ingress into the package, right? Things like that makes it challenging, but I think there are ways to design around that, right? I mean, in the flexible packaging world, if you think, there's a lot of talk about how do we get these packages that are made of multiple dissimilar layers, even though they're pretty thin, but they have like sometimes 5, 6 layers of different dissimilar materials, which are not very conducive to the existing recycling streams, right? So then the trend would be towards designing with monomaterials so that you can recycle better, for example, but which also means that you have to ensure that not only the packaging material, but any adhesive or coatings, anything that you're using is not contributing or diminishing shelf life or food safety of the package, right? So for example, when we are designing adhesives, right, we always have to think, is our adhesive food safe, right? Are any chemicals going to migrate into the food from the adhesive or the packaging material itself, right? So those are all of the considerations that come into play, right? To say, okay, it's doable. It's not like the end of the world if we have to use different or newer kinds of packaging materials, but we also have to take all of the things that go into making a package. We need to make sure it's food safe and have all the right, I don't know, parameters or properties that will not diminish the safety of the consumers, right? Consuming that food or any other material for that matter. So yeah, it is challenging, but the industry is addressing it, right? You are already seeing in the markets different forms of packaging to reduce the use of plastic material, for example, or reduce the use of paper material, or just generally reduction and use of some of this, and also things that are more conducive to the existing recycling streams, or they're compostable, whether they're home compostable or maybe industrial compostable or biodegradable even, right? So complex things to think about, but it's been addressed. But again, it's a journey. I don't think tomorrow we'll wake up and have a solution that everything that we use is all of a sudden 100% recyclable, made of 100% recycled materials, or everything is home compostable coming from biosources, right? We have to be also realistic, I think, in that, and accept the fact that it'll be steps that we will have to take towards more sustainable offerings.
Yeah, it's one of the things I find fascinating in the plastics industry or the packaging industry is that we have these mandates on, sort of renewable content or recycled content, and yet there's no enforcement or way of checking how many times the plastic has been recycled or what's in it. So it's certainly an area that the industry needs to address at some stage before things get a little bit out of hand.
Right. Yeah.
Now, one of the things, one of the beauties of the packaging industry is that it's actually fairly recession proof, and even during COVID, we in some sectors we actually saw growth in the packaging industry, as obviously when everyone went to online shopping, some areas of packaging actually grew. So it's a nice market to be in. Nevertheless, we're seeing in Europe, stagnation or lower growth in those markets. And obviously, the attention, as always, is around emerging economies. How do you see the emerging economies contributing to growth, in the packaging industry?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a great question. And as you mentioned, right, there are certain economies that have more, they have plateaued, right? Yes, we saw even in North America or Europe, Western Europe, we saw things tick up during COVID. People being at home, ordering a bunch of stuff, right? All of that. But that also has plateaued, as we have seen, and you see it from the reports, right? Whereas the emerging economies, I think there is, again, rapid urbanization, right? Modern lifestyle, and there's still, and the sheer population, like if you think about India or China, that the population is significantly higher, right, than rest of the world. So obviously that, and also I think emergence of the strong middle class in some of the emerging economies with a lot of disposable income. So where you can go buy microwavable food or prepackaged food and all of that population is also increasing. So we definitely see those as growth areas for sure, the emerging markets. Especially in flexible packaging, right? Because the format is such that it lends itself to pretty cost-effective transportation and adaptability. You can have different packaging forms pretty easily, right? You can have a small flexible package or a bigger one, refillable. Also, when there is high population density, I think there's sometimes scarcity of space, right? So you don't want huge packages, right? Big bottles of detergent, for example, or big bags of food, but you want very customizable, smaller packaging formats. And I think all of those in the emerging regions, we are seeing a big trend towards like a growth in those areas, right? So, and definitely, yeah, we definitely, they are part of our growth plans, those regions. And I think that you will hear that from anyone that you talk to, right? That those are the areas to focus on. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even at Markets and Markets, we've been running various projects, in India, for instance, on aseptic packaging cartons and chilled beverage cartons and things like that. So I absolutely agree with you that, that burgeoning middle class is definitely growing the market for some of these products in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So we mentioned the sort of eco-friendly trend and the convenience food. We're also seeing trends towards these health conscious consumers as well as being a major driver to not only the food industry but also the packaging industry that goes hand in hand, of course, with that. How do you see the packaging industry catering to these sort of demographics of the health conscious, the eco conscious, etc.?
Yeah, I think, the health conscious consumers obviously are a big percent of the population that the brand owners are catering to also, right? So I think one piece is whether it's food safety, one aspect, right? If it's food packaging, they're more conscious, right? They want to know more, right? Okay, is my food packaged in recycled, does my package that my food is coming in or other consumer goods are coming in, are they using recycled content? Could be, is it safe? Are the adhesives or the coatings that are used in these packagings, are they food safe, for example? Or are they generally less hazardous to begin with, right? So I think those are some of the things. And a lot of the brand owners you will see put things on, if they have recycled content in their packaging. I'm sure you've seen that in grocery stores and stuff, right? Like where it'll say made with X amount of recycled content and all that. So I think these are more eco-conscious and health-conscious consumers, right? And they want to know more. And I think if you think about flexible packaging, it's designed to protect and maintain the quality and the safety of the food, right? Even though you're not consuming it in like 2 days, you are confident that my package is giving me that protection for things like healthier foods, could be beverages, could be pharmaceuticals, right? And these consumers have very high expectations from the brand owners, right? That, okay, if I'm going to go and pay a certain price and buy a branded product, it better be good, right? In terms of it better be safe and healthy for me. And it could be just food packaging or any packaging, because we see people don't like to see, like Amazon stopped shipping their products in plastic bags, right? Essentially now have gone to paper packaging, right? Again, because, okay, the consumers demanded that that happens, not from whether it's from a health perspective or a more eco-conscious or, sustainability perspective. We are seeing all of them drive the industry to also improve and do better, right? Whether it's the packaging makers, the adhesive or the coating makers, right? So that we can all ensure that nothing from the package is going to impact your food or any product that you are buying, right? So that's what we have been seeing.
Okay. Now you briefly mentioned adhesives, and you also briefly mentioned sort of mono material products. And we work with a lot of sort of paper-based carton companies, as well as the plastic bottle producers, etc. And one of the feedbacks on these cartons is often they have a plastic liner and they have an adhesive, which is often a plastic as well. So I just wonder what your opinions are with respect to adhesives. You obviously work for an adhesive company. How are adhesives going to help overcome these challenges of recycling, food safety, eco-friendly, etc. in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think our goal as adhesive producers, right? Like we want to enable our customers to meet their sustainability goals, whatever that might be, right? Somebody may say, I want recyclable, my package to be recyclable, right? Or my package to be compostable, or whether it's industrial compostable, home compostable. We hear like a gamut of things, right? Based on the brands or our customers asking for certain things. And I think when we are designing adhesives, I think it's very important that you still have to have your performance properties, right? So think about flexible packaging materials, like, for example, like let's say a pet food pouch or something, right? That goes through a retort after the food is filled for food safety. Could go other packages that can go through pasteurization processes. So the adhesive not only has to withstand those kind of conditions, right? Like where the food is getting filled, maybe hot, maybe different chemicals, as in maybe the food is acidic, right? Or the food is more alkaline, right? Those kind of environments that adhesive has to perform. But at the same time, that we need to ensure that nothing is coming from our adhesive and contaminating the food at those conditions, right? So we have to design for what we would call low migration adhesives. What that means is none of the chemicals are going to migrate into the food, right? Even though there are multiple barriers, right? So we are constantly thinking about that, and we are also trying to design to the needs of our customers, right? To what is their application? What do they want in when they say, do they want more recycled content? Do they want more compostability, right? And that drives our development. And also, we have to be able to make sure whatever they're doing after the package has been used, if they're recycling, we do not want our adhesives to interfere in the recycling process, right? So in flexible packaging, as you know, if they need to be able to fit into the existing recycling streams without interfering with that. If you think about paper, it's usually going through a repulping process, and you don't want your adhesive interfering with the repulping process where you are not getting enough paper fibers back, right? So that your recycling content needs to be, you want to be able to recover maybe greater than 95% of your paper fibers, right? To go into the to be added into the next cycle. So yeah, so I think we think about all of those things based on the application and the needs of our customers, and design for that. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, there's some good points here about food migration. I mean, I remember in the days when food cling film used to be made of PVC, and you used to get the
Right.
plasticizer sort of migrating out of the material into your cheese, and obviously it's subsequently been changed. So this has been a challenge in the industry for, in multiple areas. So it's good that the adhesives company are working on that and are being mindful of that. Just around sort of sustainability in food packaging, is there anything else that you guys are doing? Solvent-free, water-based adhesives, anything around emissions, or that you guys are working on in order to drop the environment and the total environmental impact of the packaging you're producing?
Absolutely. So, we do have a lot of different technologies that we work in, right? So obviously a big trend towards water-based adhesives in certain areas, right? And solvent-free adhesives to reduce the emissions, right, from the solvent-based systems. So we definitely have very robust product lines that in those technology areas, both for, again, paper packaging, flexible packaging, right? So that's a big area for us. We are also, like looking at, again, making our adhesives less hazardous. And I don't mean to say that they're hazardous now, right? But as we learn more about things, right? Like you said, PVC cling film, right? It's kind of hard to think about it now, right? With the plasticizer migration and all that, but that did happen, right, at one time. So I think as we are learning more, as there are more awareness around these topics, I think we are definitely looking at designing safer adhesives. That's our goal, right? The safer adhesives that meet the performance criteria, but also fulfills and do not interfere with the recycling or the sustainability things that go along with it, right? Also, as a company, I think overall we want to reduce our footprint too, right? As in general, not just the product, but overall. So we pay a lot of attention to our operations, right? And how do we reduce our carbon footprint there in terms of emissions, water usage, and all of that. And we publish a sustainability report every year, right? That kind of details out our focus areas in terms of reducing overall carbon footprint of the company as a whole, right? Not just the products that we are making. So that's some of the things that we have been doing to improve things, I guess.
Okay. And one of the often confusing things that people that aren't in the packaging industry is this whole issue around sort of recyclable packaging and also compostable packaging, and the difference between the two. I'm just wondering what your take is and how you address it from an adhesive perspective as well.
Right. I mean, they are so there is always little confusion, right? Is it biodegradable? Is it compostable? Is it recyclable? Right? They all mean different things, right? So, I'll start with biodegradation. That's kind of a term that's like, okay, in the right environment, something will degrade into something much smaller, ideally without creating microplastics eventually and all of that, right? But when we're talking about compostability, again, it is also degradation but under a specific temperature, time, and there are very specific guidelines around the time and the temperature and the parameters that you're using to test for it, right? So If it is, and again, there's also a difference between whether something is home compostable versus industrially compostable, right? Because the compost medium that you are using is going to be different and the time frames that you do the tests for. And the test typically is like, oh, when do this material go to greater than 90%? Like it has to go to greater than 90% mineralization at within a certain specified period of time, right? Based on the protocols you're using. So it's very, very parameter dependent when you are talking about compostability. Biodegradation, on the other hand, yeah, it could be 2 years, it could be more than that, it could be less than that, and then it's not maybe as defined. There are now test protocols where it's more defined, right? And then recycling is completely different, right? There are existing recycling streams, like for easy to think about is PET bottles, right? Like that we buy soda and all of that in, right? That is a very specific recycling stream, right? That is mechanical recycling. So you're putting in the PET and you're getting out on the other side recycled PET. Similarly, you have polyolefins like polypropylene or polyethylene recycling streams where it's more mechanical. It's not degrading it. You are mechanically recycling the material and then use that recycled content in your fresh to make or incorporating it into your virgin material, right? So there is differences, and all of them could be interesting depending on where you are and which region of the world you are in, right? So some cases, like for example in Europe, the recycling infrastructure it's pretty strong, right? It's mechanical recycling. There are pretty well established recycling facilities, recycling streams. So we see a lot of push towards that, right? I currently live in Germany, so we are always separating by, our recycling content and all of that. And it's good because there's the infrastructure and it can be dealt with. In North America, the recycling structure is there, depending on which region where you are at. Maybe not as strong as Europe. It's growing, obviously, because people are getting more and more aware and conscious. So maybe, in North America, we might, you may hear that compostability is a bigger draw, and home compostability is a bigger draw because I get a package of snack or whatever, and then I can just let it compost, right? Instead of taking it to an industrial composting center, right? Or whatever the case may be. Versus in Asia, if you read the reports, plastic waste is showing up on the beaches and shores, right? In Southeast Asia, like tons and tons of it. It's all over the globe, but you see it in a much bigger scale in Asia. And there it might be, more biodegradability or something, right? Because you don't have the industrial composting centers or the infrastructure that's needed for mechanical recycling, right? So I think we will see some interesting patterns emerge based on regions over the next couple of years for sure, that what takes hold where more.
Okay. Now you mentioned sort of monomaterial products previously. You also mentioned sort of barrier properties as well. I recently did a project for a pharmaceutical company wanting to change from PVC in those blister packs where you pop the tablets through the foil. They wanted to change away from PVC to what they regarded as a more recyclable material, maybe a polyolefin or something like that. The challenge arose, of course, in that PVC actually has really good, barrier properties, oxygen and moisture, containment. What is happening in the areas of sort of barrier films, and what innovations have been happening in that area to help to solve this challenge, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Everybody wants to go to something more recyclable or more sustainable options, right? And whether typically, if you think about pharmaceutical packaging, in some form is kind of flexible packaging, if you will, right? Because you're able to flex and pop out the pills. Yeah, so there are these challenges of how do you, if you remove the PVC, people use PVDC, people use SiOX layers, right, for barrier, for oxygen barrier, for example. And how do you have to keep your medicine safe, right? And so that it retains all the properties and there is no oxygen ingress, like I was talking about. So what has been done, there's a lot of work going on in the barrier coating space, right? So that you are not only in the university setting, research setting, but academia, but also in smaller startups, right? There's a lot of innovative ideas. And I think what we are seeing is a trend of using, if you're going to use monomaterials, whether that's polypropylene, polyethylene, obviously they don't have great oxygen barrier, right? So you need some kind of a coating that is more sustainable and will not interfere with your recycling processes, or if you're going to want a compostable package with your composting and all of that. So yeah, so I think, has anybody like, it'll take some time for adoption also. I think, it's kind of a, you go and tell someone, oh, now you have to take out your PVC, PVDC, or SiOX layer. People are nervous, right? Because they're thinking of what will happen to the product that we are packaging, right? If we don't get it right. So there will be, what we see is a lot of work, a lot of initiatives. All of the bigger companies are involved and wanting to do it. A lot of the brand owners are very interested, right? Someone like a Pepsi, or some, Coke, those kind of, CPGs are very interested in going to these kind of options, right? Of having these barrier coatings. But again, adoption will take time. Some of it will be driven by regulation, right? So I think it's a matter of time till the time we see like that becoming more mainstream. Right now, I wouldn't say like everybody's using a barrier coating, right? But we might get to that place at some point, I think, with adoption, and also the performance, right? I mean, we can't just take out one thing and expect that you will immediately hit the holy grail, right? You'll have everything that comes from an existing material. So, but I would say that there has been a lot of work that's been done, and a lot of brand owners, companies like us are involved and doing the work, right? So I'm optimistic that we'll get to that place eventually.
Yeah. So we actually found some materials, cyclic olefin copolymers that could sort of step in, that had barrier properties. Of course, there's then a trade-off with cost, and then also the materials, have to be able to be used on the existing thermoforming machinery
Right.
as well, which is
Yes.
the other challenge. Of course, you can change the material, but do you have to then change all the machines and all the infrastructure to get it to work? So it's not just for the chemists, the clever chemists in the
No,
polymer labs to do. It's got to be all the way through the value chain to implement that.
absolutely. And we see that too, right? Like you're mentioning, it's not just about the chemistry, right? Let's say I have a water-based barrier coating today, right? That I want to apply. And if I am going to a flexible packaging converter, right, or a film producer that is making these multi-layer structures, a lot of times they're co-extruding, right? Or they're doing some other technique, or, let's say it's paper with a extrusion coated polyethylene, right? So then now if you're saying, hey, I have this really cool technology, they have to, they have to think about investing, right? Because if you have an extrusion coating line versus a water-based coating are two completely different things and application methods, right? So then the timeline for adoption may be much longer. But I think the regulations and that we're seeing around recycling and food protection and sustainability will drive some of that all over the globe.
Okay. Well, Ritu, look, we've covered pretty much the whole extent of the packaging industry so far. Thank you very much for providing such comprehensive insights. Have you any final thoughts or anything you wanted to share with us while you're on the podcast?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the other things, we keep touching upon regulations and regulatory challenges and needs. And I think that's also a journey and it's still evolving, right? Of what regulations we will see, and again, how if they are more of the global nature, standardized versus more regional, right? We already see some of the regional nuances, right? So if you're in Europe and you are going to recycle paper packaging or repulp, we use a slightly different protocol than you would use in North America, right? So, I mean, eventually it'll be great if the regulations were standardized. Same thing with food safety regulations, right? There is FDA, there's the European body, like you hear about BFR and all of those, right? Guidelines, and they all are slightly different from one another. Then you go to Asia, you will have China, which is on a different compliance for food, rights. Latin America is different. So that I feel like that makes it very challenging for, not only adhesive developers, but for, any of us that are trying to work in this space. So I think, some standardization, I think if people now the regulatory bodies are starting to talk to each other. I know in Europe for recycling, we have Recyclability, but in US, it's the Association for Plastic Recyclers, APR. They were kind of a little far away from each other. Now they're starting to come together and put their heads to. So I think we will we can only hope that eventually we have a little more standardization, because that is a huge regulatory challenge from a product development standpoint, right? Like of what we want. Ideally, people would like, global customers will like global products, right? But sometimes we are not able to do it because it's so challenging in terms of regulatory compliance needs. So, yeah, just some parting comments, I guess, on the world of regulations.
Yeah, regulations is a big thing. In fact, we've recently just done a webinar roundtable where we got Amcor and Berry Global, and I think we had someone from H.B.Fuller as well, actually discussing, where regulations are going to go, and it's a minefield as to how it may happen, particularly in the different regions. So, yeah, glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, thank you. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but some of the challenges that you face as you are developing products, I'm looking at it from that perspective. This happens to us all the time, right? Like, okay, can we have a globally compliant product? That would be great. Yeah, sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's okay, no, maybe we'll get close, but not exactly a global product.
Yeah. So, Ritu, thank you very much once again for the fascinating insight you've been able to give us here on this podcast. And also thank you to listeners. Thank you to listening into the Markets and Markets Disruption Dialogues. This will be one of a series of podcasts that you'll be able to find on the online platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to know how you can navigate and thrive in this disruptive era, subscribe to Disruption Dialogues on your go-to podcast channels and stay tuned for more interesting episodes.